Should you keep a high performer everyone hates working with? Now, there are two easy answers to this problem, and I don't think either of them is good enough. The first answer is, hey, they get results, so you just have to put up with them. A lot of businesses actually do that. They know the person is hard to work with, people avoid them, handovers are painful, meetings are tense, and the team is frustrated, but that person brings in the revenue, or they hold key client relationships, or they solve those hard problems, or perhaps they know part of the business that no one else really understands. So they tolerate it. Now, the second answer sounds more kind of culturally mature, and you might find people posting this on LinkedIn as this big statement. It's something like, culture is everything. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. If they don't meet that standard, move them on. Now, yes, there's some truth to that. Standards do matter, culture matters, behavior matters. But if you actually have sat in the manager's chair, you know the decision is not always that simple. But what if this person really is valuable and you can't live without them right now? So this is the question we'll be looking at, and this is the tension of this episode. It's not simply, should we keep them or get rid of them? The better question is, can we keep the value they create without continuing to pay for the damage around it? And if that sounds hard, stay with me, because I want to give you a way to work through it without defaulting to either extreme, pretending the behavior is fine because the person gets the job done, or espousing the decision as being easy because, culture matters. By the end of this episode, I want to give you a way to work out whether this person is genuinely a high performer or whether they are a high output person the rest of the business is quietly paying for. And I want to show you how to have the conversation without getting dragged into a debate that you are unlikely to win. My name is Tommy Sim, and this is Lead to Grow. Before we go too far, now this is not legal advice or commentary on any particular employee, employer, client, or termination. If you're dealing with anything formal or legally sensitive, get advice that fits the facts, contract, the jurisdiction, and situation. What I want to focus on is the leadership problem that often comes before the formal problem. That is standards, dependence, communication, business design, and sometimes courage. Now, the first trap is assuming the person is definitely a high performer just because one number looks good. This happens a lot in sales. Someone is at the top of the leaderboard, so everyone calls them a high performer. They win the big deal, but delivery spends 3 weeks fixing problems they never agreed to. The client sees the win, but the business pays for the mess. Or it could be that they've inherited some very favorable accounts or referral partners. It can happen with technical people too. They solve problems no one else can solve, but they make the junior staff feel stupid, dismiss other people's ideas, and keep deep knowledge trapped in their own head. It can happen with managers whose team hits the number, whilst people feel exhausted and they're quietly looking for other jobs. It's a time bomb waiting to go off. And it can happen with client favorites. The client says, hey, they always get the job done, which matters. Client praise is important, but it's not the whole scorecard. Sometimes the client sees the rescue and the team sees the chaos behind it. That is why I would separate the headline performance from net contribution. Headline performance is the thing that is easiest to see: revenue, output, client praise, technical skill, speed, the team result, or the rescue. Net contribution is what is left after you include the cost, the rework, the margin, the delivery pain, staff turnover, management time, customer risk, poor handovers, damaged trust, and 2 sets of rules. Sometimes a person looks more valuable than what they really are because no one is measuring what they cost. Shortly, I'll give you a simple net contribution test to make that easier to see. There is another reason this conversation is hard. The same strength that makes this person valuable externally is often the strength that they use internally to avoid the standard. If they are brilliant in sales, they can convince you why they're right and point to the scoreboard. If they're analytical, they use logic to win. If they're technical, they use complexity. If they are loved by clients, they'll remind you of the client relationship and maybe even use their charm with you. Suddenly, the manager is no longer talking about behavior. The manager is trying to prove that they understand the person's world well enough to challenge them. That is the strength shield. When someone uses the thing they're genuinely good at to protect themselves from feedback. And the reason it works is because there is often truth to it. The salesperson asks, do you want me to hit the target or not? Well, yes, you do. The technical expert says, you don't understand how complex this is. Maybe you don't. The client favorite says, client is happy. That might be true. That is why the answer cannot be a slogan. When people online say, culture is king, or senior leaders just say, at least they get results. Both are true. The leadership work is the harder middle. If you attempt to address the behavior, this person may not just calmly sit there and answer your coaching questions. They'll likely push back. They'll ask closed questions to box you in. They'll get agitated. They'll say they don't have enough time. They'll make you feel like you're slowing them down. And if they know they're valuable, they may also know they have the power. Not necessarily formal power, but practical power. They might hold the client relationship, know the system, bring in the revenue, and be more experienced and commercially aggressive than perhaps the manager who's trying to lead them. They may even believe they're more capable than that leader. And when that power shows up in the conversation, the manager can get pulled into their ground very quickly. If sales is their area, they'll pull you into sales. Logic, they'll bring you into logic. Technical detail, they'll bury you in the technical detail. And if urgency is their arena, they can make everything feel like a crisis. Now, suddenly you're no longer talking about the standard. You're trying to prove that you understand their world. And that is the wrong field to fight on. So rather than trading blows in a fist fight that you're likely to lose, this is where you need more of a, I'll call like a jujitsu move, just as a simple image to contrast approaches. So in other words, you're using their force of their argument to go to a conversation that's more useful. So if they say, do you want me to hit my target or not? I would not accept that as a true choice question. The response is not, yes, but you still need to follow the process. That creates a fight. A more effective response is, yes, I want the target hit, and I want the target hit in a way the business can deliver repeatedly. I don't want to make a choice between performance and standards. The question is how we do both. That shift matters. You're not asking them to admit that they were wrong. You're asking to move from yesterday's defense to tomorrow's operating model. With this person, yes, but often turns into a debate. Yes, and keeps the conversation moving. So what we're doing is to reframe the conversation to the design standard for next time. Don't try and make them admit that they are difficult. Work with them to test whether their value can continue without the business paying for it through rework, tension, dependency, and lower standards. Respect the strength. Remove the exemption. That is the reframe. Soon, I'll walk you through 5 steps I would use to move from this fear and frustration debate into a clear standard, an agreement, and clean evidence about what's going to happen next. Quick pause before we keep going. Leadership doesn't happen by accident. It's not a one-off event. It's an ongoing investment. So if leadership development matters to you, make it easy to keep it front of mind. If you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell so every new episode comes straight to you. One less thing to chase, one more way to stay intentional about your growth. And if you believe better leadership should reach more people, then give this episode a like on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That simple action helps more leaders find the show and helps those ideas travel further than just this conversation. Also, if you know someone who's dealing with a high performer who is hard to manage, this might be a useful episode to share with them privately. All right, let's get back to it. So this is what I'd do. I'd use this 5-step plan. These steps stop you from making a decision from fear, frustration, or a slogan. They give you a cleaner way to test whether the value can stay and the damage can reduce. Step 1 is to identify the strength and the shield. Before the conversation, ask yourself, what is this person's extreme strength and how might they use it to control the conversation? If they're a salesperson, expect the number and the influence. If they're technical, expect the detail and feeling that you might be out of your depth. If they're analytical, expect the logic and possibility that you feel less intelligent just for a moment. If they're driven, expect urgency and pressure. And if they're client love, expect the client praise and maybe even your own ego being stroked. Prepare for the real conversation, not the ideal one. They may not sit there calmly and reflect. That they may try to turn the conversation back to the deal, the client, the urgency, the technical detail, or why everyone else is slowing them down. If you're not ready for that, you'll get pulled into their field. So before you walk in, get clear on 2 things. What value do they genuinely create? And what exemption have they started expecting because of that value? Step 2 is to move from the incident to the operating model. Do not spend the conversation trying to prove yesterday was wrong. Sometimes yesterday is arguable. The person may have had a good case. The deal may have been urgent. Operations may have been slow. If you get stuck debating the past, the conversation becomes a courtroom. They defend, you prosecute. They find context, you find impact. And soon the whole conversation is about whether you can beat them on one example. So a better approach is to say, hey, this is not about reliving yesterday. I assume the pressure you're describing was real. I want to design what happens next time. Would you like to work together on that? This approach changes the field. It reframes the individual situation to the micro topic. Highly capable people like to talk about high level topics, and you're inviting them to do so. Do they want to stay stuck on page 2 when you're already on page 7? Probably not. There is no need to fight them under pressure. You're taking the force of their argument and turning it into the design brief. So if the process is too slow, the design brief is speed without chaos. If the client needed an answer, the design brief is client confidence without overpromising. If operations did not respond, the design brief is an escalation rule that sales can use without bypassing delivery. Their argument becomes that design brief. This is the jiu-jitsu move. And if they say, I don't have time for this, I've got client issues to sort out, avoid the status battle. Say, I know you're under pressure. That is why I want this to be useful. Let's keep it to 20 minutes and leave with one clear rule for next time so we're not having the same issue again. And if there's genuinely an urgent customer issue, say, hey, tell me what it is and we can adjust the timing. This conversation still needs to happen because the way we are handling these moments is now creating work for other people. Step 3 is to focus them on the bigger picture and use micro agreements to align with each other. So we've established that the highly capable person doesn't want to hear that they're wrong. They see that as disrespect. Their ego is tied to being very capable. So we're not going for the bigger mission, we're shifting to the big picture. The reason I want to talk about this is bigger than just one deal. We're trying to build a business that can scale. That means strong sales, reliable delivery, retained staff, clear handovers, consistent service levels, and fewer last-minute rescues. You're an important part of that. So I want to work with you on how we get there. That last part matters because you're not trying to make them small. In fact, you're inviting them to be bigger. A lot of high performers respond better when you connect the conversation to the person that they think they are or they view themselves as. If they want to be seen as senior, the implicit message is senior people don't just get results. They help build the model that makes results repeatable. If they want more autonomy, the understanding is that autonomy comes from trust, and trust is built when speed doesn't create avoidable damage. This is not about flattering the person. This is about just framing things in a way that they can buy into. Then ask questions to keep the conversation focused on the future. What does sales need from operations when a deal is live? What does operations need from sales before they can give a reliable answer? What can we promise the client immediately? What is the escalation pathway if the normal process is too slow? Build momentum with small agreements that are hard to reasonably reject. Micro agreement statements can help transition to the next discussion. For instance, in sales and operations, it might be something like, well, given where we want to get to, we need the sales number here. Yes? Of course, they're going to say yes. We also need to deliver what we sell, right? Okay, so if we're going to grow, we need sales moving quickly and operations delivering consistently, yes? And we need to retain good operations people because the business can't scale if they're burning out. Yes? Sure? Okay, good. So these are some of the things we want to get agreement on. So now we're not arguing whether the person was right. We're aligning on that future and we're walking together. The aim is not to win or lose. The aim is to get a mutual understanding and agreement. And then we can get to a point where we can have some actions. So the aim is to get that agreement for the future standard. Now, again, I need to stress that this conversation is going to have messy parts to it. But if you're both working together in the right direction, you have the potential to get to a better place or otherwise clarity that you can't. Now, step 4 is to turn the agreement into if this, then that behaviours. This is where a lot of conversations fail. So the manager has this big discussion and the high performer gives context. Both people agree the situation is complicated and the conversation ends with something like, well, we just need to communicate better, or another vague statement like, let's be more collaborative. That's not strong enough. A standard becomes real when it tells people what to do next time. So once you have an agreement on the bigger picture, turn it into practical rules. If the business is not where it needs to be yet, given the bigger picture, there also needs to be an interim position of what you both agree to do. So some examples of that could be, if a customer asks for a delivery date, then sales checks capacity before confirming. If operations cannot respond within 30 minutes on a live deal, then sales escalates to the operations lead rather than bypassing the process. If sales needs to keep momentum with the client, then the client message is, I'm checking delivery capacity right now and I'll confirm by 3 p.m. If a handover is incomplete, then the work does not move to delivery until the minimum information is there. Things may work differently in your business, but I'm confident you get the picture by now. And just to contrast that, say a technical expert thinks a junior person has missed something, then the rule might be, ask one clarifying question before dismissing the work. If they believe the process is wrong, then raise the process issue in the weekly operations meeting rather than ignoring it. If they disagree with someone in a meeting, then let the person finish before responding. If they're frustrated with a teammate, then address the issue directly or raise it with the manager. Do not make side comments to the wider team. The point is not to wrap the high performer in red tape. The point is to stop their strength creating avoidable damage. Now, if they resist the structure and say, this is just going to slow me down, bring it back to the future model. The goal is not to slow you down. The goal is to create a faster pathway that protects both the client and the business, which is what we agreed we both want. Once those rules are agreed, write them down, not as punishment, just as a shared operating standard. Something like, so from today, when the client request affects delivery capacity, the agreed pathway is check capacity before confirming, escalate to operations if no response within 30 minutes, and use the agreed client language when checking. We'll review how this is working in 2 weeks. So book the follow-up at the time when you make the agreement. I would say, let's review this in 2 weeks to check in on how each of us did with our actions, what situations have arisen since today, and if we've seen an improvement. The mutual commitment to action is important. If they agreed to check delivery capacity before confirming a client timeframe, did they do it? If they agreed to use the escalation pathway instead of bypassing operations, did they do it? If they agreed to stop making side comments in meetings, did they do that? And just as importantly, did you do what you agreed? If you agreed to fix the escalation pathway, clarify the handover requirement, or get operations to commit to a response time, did you follow through? Because if you did not, you're not protecting the standard and you will lose credibility. If they did what they agreed, recognize it and keep building. If they partly did it, tighten the rule. If they did not do it, the conversation changes. Now you're not retrying yesterday. You're essentially saying, we agreed what would happen next time. It did not happen. So the issue now is whether I can rely on your agreement. That does not mean that they're gone, and you don't have to say it exactly like that. But it means you have a clearer evidence. It may lead to more support, more controls, a clear process, or perhaps a formal pathway if the pattern continues. It may also show that they gave lip service in the room and returned to the old behavior when the pressure came back. The follow-up is where the agreement becomes evidence. This is where you need to stop relying on feel and run the net contribution test. Ask yourself, what did this person produce that is genuinely valuable? What did they cost that does not show up in their personal scorecard? A client's happy because this person creates sustainable value because everybody else absorbs the chaos. Is the team performing because of this person or despite them? Would we tolerate this behavior if their number was just average? If they left tomorrow, what would we lose and what might we regain? You might lose revenue, knowledge, client confidence, or speed. That matters. You might also regain energy, trust, consistency, staff retention, cleaner handovers, and a standard everybody believes in again. And the honest answer is we cannot challenge this person because the business depends on them too much. Then you've discovered another problem. That is not just high performance, that is dependency risk. So part of the plan should be reducing the dependency, share the client relationship, document the process, cross-train another person, build the next layer of capability. Stop letting one person become the only bridge between the business and the results. You might have inherited this situation, but if you don't fix it, you're now perpetuating the issue. Because if one person has become too valuable to manage, the business and the leader of that team has allowed value to become leverage. So before you ask, should we keep this person or move them on, ask the better question. Have we actually worked out whether the value can continue without the damage? Do not tolerate poor behavior just because someone gets results. That teaches everyone else the standard is negotiable. At the same time, do not rush to a simple culturally popular answer that ignores the real commercial value a person may be creating. That can be just as lazy in the other direction. Do the more effective work. Look at headline performance and net contribution. Understand the strength and the shield. Do not fight them in their strongest field. Use a jiu-jitsu style thinking. Move them from the incident to the operating model. Build small agreements. Turn those agreements into if this, then that behaviors. Follow up to see whether people did what they agreed. Then review the evidence and make the clean decision. Because a true high performer should make the business better, not just make one number look better and leak out value on the other side. The best outcome is not that the person leaves. The best outcome is that the person keeps creating value and stops creating unnecessary cost around it. And if they cannot or will not do that, then the business needs to be honest about what it is really protecting. So before you call someone a high performer, look at the whole ledger. Look at what they produce and look at what everybody else is paying for the way they produce it. The question is not just, can we afford to lose them? The real question is, can we afford to keep protecting the exception? Leadership doesn't grow by accident. It grows because you choose to work on it. Thanks for making the time today. I'm Tommy Sim, and this is Lead to Grow. New episodes come out regularly. Hope to see you again.